Okay, so we're going to get started a few minutes late. Thank you all for coming. It's great to see so many of you here and excited about the Sumas history. We love it and we really appreciate all of you coming. So we're trying to do a series of local history this spring, and so the first one is here about Sumas history. The next one we're going to do is about the Sumas Roundup. It's February 4th, and Deborah Morgan is going to present that one. And I've got some little handouts. I'll pass them around, and you guys can take kind of a reminder. It's going to be February 4th at 7 p.m. over at the Senior Center. It's a Wednesday. And then the one after that, we are doing about, it's called Drive-Ups, Drive-Throughs, and Drive-Ins, about the history of movie theaters and restaurants in Whatcom County by a local author. He just published a book this past December, and he will be here to talk. And then we have one more arranged in April 1st. Again, that one will be, the Drive-Up one will be here. The one April 1st will be at the Senior Center. We're kind of going back and forth. And that one is going to be, it's called Kinsey, Photographic Legacy. It's about famous photographer, early 1900s, late 1800s, and his wife, about the railroads and the logging in this community. And we do have one of his books up here on the, shows his photos up here on the red cart. If you're interested in that, you can check it out. And then our final one, we hope to have about the history of the railroads in the area in May. And I'm still working on setting that up. So here is about Deborah's talk. And then at the end of the talk, I'm going to pass out some feedbacks about our presentation. Just general what you thought of it. If it was what you expected, based on what library staff told you. If you could hear everything, if you could see everything, hopefully you can. And then just some other ideas, if you guys have any ideas of other presentations or groups or discussions that you would like to see. We would love to hear from you so that we can continue this and have more exciting things. So, I'm going to take that and pass it on. So, our speaker today is Rod Perry. He is a local liver. I don't know, he's lived here for, I don't even know how many years you've lived here.
All my life.
Okay, all his life. So I did know that actually, because people told me that. Anyway, so he's going to tell you a little bit about himself and he's talking about Sumas. So thank you.
Thank you, Galen. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's exciting to see so many people that are interested in the history of this area. My talk today is going to be more about the general area rather than the town of Sumas. And I should know a little bit about the history, as my grandfather, not my great-grandfather, but my grandfather came through this area using the Whatcom Road in 1872 on his way to build or help build the railroad tunnels up at Yale. Now, if you know your BC history, BC became a part of the Dominion of Canada, and there were two things they wanted. One, to forgive their debt, which is a good thing for them, and the second one was to get a railroad in, because the U.S. had already had the railroad through and they were taking all the trade. So one of the reasons that they took on such a big debt was building the roads for the gold rush that was up there. The Whatcom Road continued on up to the Caribou Trail, and they spent a lot of money and went in a lot of debt to build that. So as my grandfather came back, I always like to say he walked a day's walk too far. And we'll see why he walked that day's walk too far, because if you're a dairy farmer, you want to farm up in Canada, not in the United States. So anyway, then he homesteaded, or he homesteaded actually over where the Nooksack High School, in that 160-acre quarter section there. But he was a fireman. He was an engineer company #1 down in Seattle. And he moved back to this area after 1889. And if you remember your history of the Great Seattle Fire, I think it was in June of 1889, they had that big fire. Well, he was a fireman, and lo and behold, a few months later, he comes up here. So he probably was depressed from everything they lost. So anyway, then when he came back, he actually lived in a log house on his dad's place, which would be my great-grandfather. and that's where we live today. And we're one of the four, there's more than four though, but they're one of the four remaining homestead farms in Whatcom County. There's, I think, the Macaulay, the Steele, the Westergreen, and our farm. So, but that's not all of them, because I know there's another one. So, anyway, let's begin. And like I say, I want to talk about more of the geography and hydrology, and we'll get into a little ornithology too of the area here. We start out with the glacier. Now, the glacier, what it did, the Nunuksak flowed to the Fraser, but the glacier blocked the Nooksack, and at that time, as it receded, then it cut the new path over to Ferndale. So then, as it receded, then it actually went from, if you cross where the railroad tracks is on Van Buren Road, the Nooksack flowed back all the way through this Sumas Valley from over there by the basically Van Buren Road where the railroad tracks are to Vetter Mountain. So that through a lot of geological time, that happened about 10,000 years ago, and it was flowing back and forth. And then they say it was only about 800 years ago from a log jam that the Nooksack changed course and then went back towards Ferndale. And so this is what we see before any, from the old-time homeland of the Sumas Indians. We see Sumas Lake here. Sumas Lake, and you see all these trails through here. And this is a great picture. This came out of the archives up at the Chilliwack Library. And there it's showing sturgeon, and it shows beaver, and it shows all these different ones. And it shows a lot of ducks and migratory birds using Sumas Lake. And we'll come back to the lake a little later. Here's another picture. Now this is a little later. We have the WHATCOM Trail. The WHATCOM Trail went, and that was for the gold miners, basically. And the reason it was ended up at Everson is because the Nooksack at one time did not flow to Ferndale. It went to the Fraser. So the Indians could go from Chilliwack all the way to Bellingham Bay to get shellfish, and because the river wasn't there at that time. So that's why there were old trails. And this is a sign on the Telegraph Road over by Bellingham. I didn't actually take this picture, but it's showing the significance of the old Telegraph Road because it started at Whatcom, and then it meandered through Whatcom County and then hit Everson, and from Everson it crossed over, it had to go over Sumas River, and then it came up where the cemetery is, the Nooksack Cemetery, and then probably followed the Telegraph Road, and then went down and crossed Sumas River, I want to say 3 times, some of them say 4, so I imagine it was just a log or 2 they crossed on. And then it ended up on the east side of Sumas River over here, and then it actually then went to Canada, so that's where you get the Whatcom Road. So it tied into the Whatcom Road up there. This is where it all begins. When the Indians were here, they kind of shared all the environment, and there really was no possession of the land. It was shared with all. But here signifies the Willamette Meridian. Now, I don't know if anyone has been to Willamette Stone State Heritage Park. It's in Portland, Oregon. So what this means, this is the original point of where it all started for the surveyors. And what it means, Sumas here would be 41 north. Does anyone know their 41 north range? Does anyone know their township range and section? Well, it's 41 north. Sumas would be 41 north, which you times that by 6, so that's 246 miles north of this point. and we're in section 4, range 4 east. So we're 24 miles beyond the point of the Willamette Meridian. So we'll get another little picture here. This is what they did. The Willamette Meridian was, the baseline was below the Columbia, and they tried to miss all of Whatcom County up here. But there's a little piece of Whatcom County on the west side of it. And so if you know what a township is, a township's comprised of 36 sections. And so this was how it was laid out, and this is from, I think, President Jefferson in the 1700s, how they were going to lay out the new lands. And this is just a little history of the state of Washington. It was a part of the Oregon Territory. They broke off, and I think that was in 1854 that happened. And that's when the big push to survey the territory was. This is a map I got from Denny DeMeyer of Northwest Surveying and GPS, and it shows what the surveyors found along here on the border. And this is Laxton Lake. This would be Boundary Lake or Judson Lake. And then this is this big area west of town here of that big marsh. We've got blueberries in now. And it's kind of interesting. It does show a little stream coming out of Canada up in here. And that is possible, just the way the land is. But anyway, then it also shows the Whatcom Trail coming up here, crossing through these marshes. And you got to remember, back then there was all kinds of beaver, and so they had all kinds of marshes, and it was a mess basically. And that's why the area around 10 Mile in that area was let's say homesteaded, or settlers came in there later because they had to get rid of the beaver dams and do the ditching. There could have been a stream coming out of that little valley, and it's possible, because this is from the Whatcom Conservation District, and it shows the elevations, and it's possible there was a stream coming out of there. So what really took place is the gold miners in California ran out of gold, and so then they heard that up in BC there was gold, so they all rushed up here, and they all rushed to Bellingham, and then were taking the Whatcom Road, and the county was improving that road until the day that they decided they needed to get their permits at Victoria, and that pretty much ended it here. It was going to be the new El Dorado. Oh, they were going to get rich. You know, the Spanish suffered from a disease that could only be cured by gold. And so that was part of the gold rush. This is a map of the Sumas area homesteaders. It's interesting. There's you can't read it probably, but what it shows is there's a Johnson here and a Johnson here. Well, if you go to the city website and look at the history of Sumas, they talk about Robert T. Johnson being the first settler that came through. No, that's not correct. He was the son born here of, I think, Ansel Johnson. And Johnson, obviously that's how Johnson Creek got its name. Another thing that I've seen on the maps, there's a stream up here. I want to say Mose Hill, and that's another thing. I'm sure the Indians had a name for Mose Hill, and then it was Barker Hill. Then it got changed to, gosh, what was that? Parkinson Hill. Now it's Mose Hill. So it all depends on where you are in time and space, of who's who. But anyway, the city, it used to be called Van Valkenburg Creek, but now somehow it's Sumas Creek. So, a little history there. What do we want to see in this? Gara. Does anyone know where Gara was? There was a school and there was a post office at Gara. Well, Gera, it was on the WHATCOM Road, and I want to say there was that's a blacksmith shop, but there's the post office. I know where the post office was. The post office is where J.D. Young's place is now. That's where the post office was, but the school was up towards the cemetery road. But you notice they stayed on the east side of the Sumas River. And this is a picture of what the first log, I'll call these log cabins. The difference between a log house and a log cabin is a log house was more refined and finished. It had shingles on the side. These are log cabins. This is the old Van Buren, because I did a Clearbrook thing. I'm gonna throw a few Clearbrook pictures in here. This is, but it goes to show you the dovetails. There was a George Goodwin who lived on the Goodwin Road that made quite a few of these log cabins and log houses. And this is the old Van Buren store and post office that is now in Pioneer Park over at Ferndale. That sat up, it didn't sit down where you think Van Buren would be. It sat up, about a quarter of a mile up on a hill on to the south of East Badger, or should I say Blaine Sumas Highway. But if you're in Sumas, I see they call it the Sumas Blaine Highway. And that is the school at Gera. I don't know if anybody know Low Brown. Does anybody know Low Brown? Low Brown, that's the way he pronounced it, Gera. And Low Brown was, his mother was Nims, who married a Perry. And they were second cousins to me now, of the Perrys that were in this area. So we'll come back to that a little later. Oh, there was a little problem where people took the law in their own hands. Yes, there was the lynching of Louis Sam by a bunch of vigilantes, and it caused a problem. And that was in 1884. And this is the Indians at that time were still using the Hudson Bay musket. Does that sound right? Musket, because it was about like a 58 caliber thing, and because it still had the flintlock, not the percussion, and they apparently could get parts for that. Well, anyway, this was a problem of taking the law in your own hands, and it caused an international scene. And apparently, it's marked out there in Canada somewhere. I don't know if anyone has seen that or not, but supposedly there's a marker there where this happened. This is interesting. This was Gera. This was the post office. If you want to know anything, you ask the librarian. You know, they're just full of knowledge. But this is you ask the librarian service at the Washington State Library, and you can get a lot of information. And so I asked them about Gera and Sumas. Well, Gera was established before Sumas, and it gives the directions and when it was discontinued. Obviously, it was discontinued in February 12th, 1891, and that's because the railroad had come up here. And it's interesting. I think I got another page here on that, because it talks about the mail being brought to Gera twice a week from Nooksack by a rancher, J.H. Hall, who traveled the old telegraph road. On his way and during the time it operated, he also carried mail to the little office in Tuxedo. It's kind of interesting. And they would just get different people to get the mail at the crossing and bring it there. I don't think that would go over too well now. Oh, and what I'm trying to show here, I blew this up. This is a map of the 1906 Sumas Quadrangle, and each one of these little dots is a house. And there's several things in here that I want to point out. You got Bone Creek going through there, and Lamberton. Has anybody heard of Lamberton? It looks like it was near the bridge down there on Telegraph Road. And here's where the post office was, in this, right in here, where probably J.D. Young is. And then what I'm showing here, you notice, here's Van Buren Road. Well, East Badger, it ended just past the high school because this was all swamp. So that was 1906. And then you took the Van Buren Road, and you might not be able to see it, but where it crossed, it kind of scooted over. I might have a picture later. So people to come to Sumas had to go up Van Buren, either take Clearbrook and Swanson, or Clearbrook all the way over and then up and over, or Haverstick. So it's that. Obviously, this map was made, 1906, because it's showing the railroads, the different railroads. And it's also showing the railroad going all the way through, the Milwaukee all the way going through to tie up to the Canadian National. And it also going up at the hill, to the limestone quarry or the glacier, not that far. Okay. Oh, this was the, where's it, Sumas. The Sumas post office, you would think it was the Sumas post office. No, it started out as Sumas City Post Office. Then it changed names. In, I think it was 1890 something, it says in there. Name changed to 1897. So it's just a little interesting thing about the Sumas post office. And again, I got that from the Ask the Librarian at the Washington State Library. This was the first burial at the Sumas Cemetery. And Melvina Nims, and that was in 1887. Beautiful picture. I took it out late at night, had my wife Nancy have the headlights pointing at it. But yeah, what's interesting about this, usually in the older part of the cemetery, you can see these kind of stones. These older, they were four-sided, and then you'd have another person, or four people actually sometimes, usually at least two. On the other side, the husband was engraved in that. They also used St. Anne Cemetery. A lot of people don't know where St. Anne Cemetery is, but it's off Haverstick. And this is quite you can see the moss, and I took this picture, and you got to work to get up there. Sumas, his history is tied in quite a bit to the British Columbia history, like I said before. They wanted that railroad. Well, they became a part of the Dominion of Canada in July 20th, 1871. And this is just a picture. This is actually in Saskatchewan of the surveyors surveying for the railroad. But it's a great picture. And like I say, my grandfather came in 1872 up from Seattle to the Yale because they were starting in on that railroad, starting to build that, which took a monumental effort to do because of the Fraser River Canyon and all the mountains they had to go through. This is Barkerville. You know, I thought Barkerville was just a tavern. But no, this was drawn up in I believe 90, before the railroad, 1890. Barker lived up on Mose Hill, and I think his son or whatever drew up this, and some of the roads are still in use. Some of them aren't. They got boundary road, and there is a boundary road right at the border, but it doesn't continue on. But there's Garfield, Cleveland, Harrison, and they had these. There's some names here they didn't use, but there was Lawson and Fisk Is there a Fisk in, so they're still, they drew this up. So that was before the railroad came through. I don't think it ever materialized too much. They didn't, they drew it up, but I didn't think it went through. But obviously they drew enough up to make this, to name some of the streets. And this is the Bellingham Bay in British Columbia locomotive that came to Sumas. Sumas was actually one of the very first towns that was incorporated. Because of the railroads, they had 2 railroad lines. Actually, they had at one time 6 different railroad lines coming up. It was going to be the San Francisco of Whatcom County, but it didn't quite work that way. But they were incorporated very early. You can see Nooksack didn't get incorporated in 1912, while Sumas is 1891. The railroad was the big driver of all this. And this is just a map of all the different stops along the way. I think I have a blown up part of the different names of the towns where they pick up people. Let's go back to that. You could get around easier back then than you can now. And I talked to Inez Steiner, and I don't know if any of you know Inez, but I went and visited her. She's probably 96 now. She said that they would go from Sumas to Bellingham and go around and go to a fair at Silver Beach. And you can see the railroad line went around that. So people could get around fairly easy back then. It's not like you would think that it was just with their horses and the old Whatcom Trail. No, it was set up. There were 3 tramways to the west near Clearbrook. One that went up here, which is a big one, and it ended at about 1915, and pretty much the town was done by that time too. And there was another one that was started at Kelly's and then went around up by Lakeside Cemetery. Just it was south of Pangbourne Lake. And then there was another one, which I think that was one of the first ones, that went through the Hinton place, crossed over trap line, and ended out on the south end of that big swamp. All these little symbols represent a swamp. And this is still this 1906 picture. It shows nothing, no road over here. So I just blew it up a little more for Sumas. Interesting. Well, it's showing each dot is a house, and showing Bone Creek there going into Sumas River, Johnson here, and this line is a elevation line, and it's showing the railroad going through. Actually, if you go out west of Sumas here, where the railroad, there's still a railroad bridge that crosses Van Valkenburg Creek. You can still see it. And then these are just roads to get to different places. So, well, this is down. This is where the fairgrounds were in here, but the road wasn't straight like it is now. It came at an angle and went through. So they were just paths or dirt roads back then. This is just a bigger general map of it, and then I'm showing the tramways. And out in the woods, where they were getting the wood, this is the donkey they used to pull the wood and get it out of there. Actually, the Bellingham Bay and British Columbia Railroad didn't pan out to what they thought it would, but they made it work by getting the trees and stuff off the let's say the Haverstick and all that area. Otherwise, it was a failure as far as what they first envisioned it. And this is the picture of the little tramway. This is up in the Haverstick area, and it was a narrow gauge, and it was a simple rail. It was just kind of an L. It wasn't like your main railroads with cleats and stuff. They were simple to put in. They just put them on some logs and just went in, got the lumber, and then took the rails out. And obviously it's steam, so. Might notice the trees aren't that big here. And one of the reasons is because of the fires. They used to have fires that would come through. This is a picture of Clearbrook showing the hotel, the church, you can see a little steeple, a blacksmith shop, the Clearbrook store. And then this was Tilton's barn down here. That's no longer there, but the house, if you go on Swanson Road, you'll go by the house, you'll go by some trees, and that's where the house was. They were black locusts. So a lot of people came from the Midwest, and they were planting this black locust. And they're nice. They're actually a legume. So they nitrogen fix the soil, and they can grow on real poor ground. And they planted that where our log house was. They planted on the south side, which is great for the summer, but they should have planted something on the north side for the northeast. This is a 1904 picture of Sumas. What we're showing here is, I don't know if you can make it out, there's a building right here. That's where the depot is. That's where the depot. Here's the main line today, the BN today, in here. So that line came around and connected it over here with the depot here. And does that show, there's a fire in the background? Maybe it's on the next one. Sumas was way ahead of its time, the water system. They started that water system in 1909. And it goes through a history of this. I got this from Rod Fadden at the City Hall. And yeah, it's surprising. But notice the Parkinsons, they on the Newman Road, well, they got Moe Hill here from, but some people have called it the Parkinson Hill. And that's a little more history of it. Sumas gets a lot of water from that artesian well they have. They extended it over. I don't know exactly where it is, but it's off the main road somewhere. Somewhere in there, and they pump a lot of water. In fact, they furnish it for, what is it, Nooksack, and they're going to furnish it for more people coming up. And they got, because they apparently have quite a water right. So here's the one with the fire in it, but this is 1912. Notice how much it's been built up. The main town was along the railroad here in Sumas, but back here, you know, the farmers, in order to clear the land, you burned everything pretty much. And it reminds me of when Mark Twain came to Fairhaven. He couldn't stand it because it was so smoky. The whole Puget Sound was just all smoke. So there's part of the reason. But that's obviously from Moe's Hill. What's interesting about this picture and the other one, you don't see many trees. Pretty much all the trees were logged off, and you don't see the weeds, the blackberries, any of that.
Were they not here yet?
No, they weren't. The railroad, probably had a good, railroad, the feed stores brought a lot of the weeds and stuff in. This is the car that ran from Sumas to Bellingham daily, twice daily, from about 1910 till when it ran into a freight train down in Hampton in 1922 or something like that. But this is the Mount Baker Theater here,
Oh, yes.
and this is where you can see the interurban car rails here, and so people could get around from Sumas to Bellingham. It didn't go up the up to Glacier or up the hill because it didn't have enough power. During the war, during World War II, the government flew over and took pictures in 1943. And they did pictures of this whole area. And this is a picture of Sumas in 1943. And what I'm trying to show here are two things. One, we had a railroad, we had the, I want to call it Milwaukee, coming here. You got the main railroad here. The Milwaukee went up to the hills. And there was also another railroad, and they just cut the trees on that grade, and that was this is Hovel Road here, and they just cut the trees here of that old railroad grade. That old railroad grade went around, so this had to be about after 1910 to hook on. See, it went around, crossed Swartwood Road, and crossed Rock Road, and then was on, it didn't have to cross Johnson Creek because it was over across Sumas over here, so it crossed Sumas twice actually, and then went and connected onto the BC Electric Railroad up here. Now I was told it never panned out, they never really used it, and they took it out. But you still have trees in here with an eagle's nest in it, I guess, so they can't touch it. And then they just cut these trees here recently, so that's been all just cleared off here in the last month or so. It's also showing in here the rodeo grounds. We'll get a bigger, I think I have a bigger view with it. Okay, here's a bigger view of it. And it says Sumas on the top of the rodeo roof. And that's how it was laid out, pointing that way. And that's the old railroad grade here. The Virgil Hoffman in 1945 tore this down. And apparently that's when the people used a lot of the old lumber, and some of them went to different barns out east of Sumas. Another thing that's shown is the, I'll call it the grade school. It was probably a middle school at that time. The grade school, and it shows the another school here.
Right.
That's a whole history in itself. The schools, the whole history in itself. The cemeteries, the rodeo grounds is a whole history within itself. But you can see here, they apparently had a fire. This was before they had rebuilt. Apparently they had a fire somewhere around 1944 or something, and it burned that south part, and they then built a new gym and a new cafeteria. This is just a Google picture of today. And what I'm showing is that railroad, what I'm trying to do is show that railroad line. And you can see here, it went here, and there's a couple trees here, and then it went around, and you really can't see it until you pick it up over here. In Canada, you don't see it. Apparently, when they were going to build the new road that came into Sumas, Highway 9, they were thinking about skirting around and using that old road to come up to the border. It was a thought, but it didn't materialize. Oh yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, the floods. So we'll be talking about some floods here at Sumas. This is in November 1990 when they were moving the customs building. You can see it. Now, I was told they had, or read somewhere, they were moving this. Obviously, it was during the flood, so they probably stopped. But when they went to where it's located today, they sunk, believe it or not, after a flood. And they sunk and broke a water main. So they had to get a bunch of steel plates and stuff to get it over there because it weighed a lot. I was asked to give a video of the Vox Swift. Now, this is the Vox Swift going into the chimney of the old customs building. It's not really, but it's another one somewhere. And there's going to be a hawk come up here and grab one of these Vox Swifts.
Oh!
There he is. Okay, now watch. And so now there he took off his one. Well, sometimes the crows get up there, and it's a real problem. So they make little guards so the birds can't be doing that. Now I don't know. Has anybody seen the Vox Swift going to the chimneys?
I've seen it.
There's
About
not.
10 years ago.
There's not that. I didn't. When I saw it, there weren't that many.
There was quite a few, maybe not this many.
I was trying to get the records. Somebody kept records of them, what time of year they came and left, because they're migratory. And I couldn't get those records. Someone said Larry Marion had them, but I asked around and no, he didn't. I don't know if he did. Maybe he has them, but they just can't find them.
So are they only there when they're on migration? Do they only go into that chimney when they're on their migration?
Both up and down, but I think they go in there and have their young
One
too.
every night,
All summer though?
No, just
No,
when they're here.
Just when they're here,
Just
but
on
they
migration.
make it all the way down the coast.
Yeah.
And they go to Mexico. They're kind of like the reason they light in chimneys. Their feet they can't perch.
Yeah.
They can't perch, so they go into they used to go into old growth, let's say trees and stuff. So there's not as many, but they've adapted to this, and that was one of the reasons why the old custom building was moved. This is the first meeting they had to form the Nooksack Township. They had probably had an election, and this was in the Van Buren Hall. Well, that was up at the Clearbrook School. That was the Clearbrook School, and actually, originally it was the Clearbrook Hall was originally the second school at Clearbrook, which was just before the tracks up on a little hill by Kirkman's. And then they moved it. It was a T. It was a two-room. They T'd, and then they put it together and made a community hall in 1910 at Clearbrook. Then when the schools were, I won't say closed down, what they call that, when they were put together, consolidated in 1944, the kids from Clearbrook came to Sumas. So that was, Clearbrook was, the school was done in 1944, that fall. And in 1954, then they moved that building up to the Clearbrook Church, and it's the parish hall. Sumas was part of the Nooksack Township. And there were two counties in the state of Washington that participated in the township form of government. We had 23 townships in Whatcom County, and that was from I want to say an 1896 law that they passed, and it took effect in 1897. So they participated in that, and one of the reasons they did it was basically road building, maintenance, and a garbage dump. And this is the township hall. This is it's since been turned. It was sold in '69, or yeah, the township form of government ended in '69. And this is a picture from up on the hill, looking at Clearbrook, and at the Van Buren. This is the township hall, and Van Buren store, and looks like a little. I know of a little shop that was there, but then our place is in the background, and you see those little bumps. Well, let's move on here. That's what we were haying. This isn't from our place, but this is what those little bumps represent. And this is going to be a map of the different townships. There were 23 townships. And the Nooksack Township was basically Trapline Road was the west side of the township, and then it'd be out here east of Sumas a little bit, but they also included, which is unusual for a township, they included the lower part of below Vetter Mountain for the township. And like I say, it was for cemetery maintenance, ditches, and roads. The end of the township. Does anybody know what end of the township? The garbage dump. Yes. The garbage dump on, was it Road? Yeah, they were having more regulations and stuff, and so that was pretty much the end. And the end, December 31st, 1969, it was sold. The buildings, and it was done. And it all went to the county. And from that morphed the fire districts and the cemetery districts. Because, you know, once you get a government involved, they don't like to give up anything. But what's interesting about this, the cemetery district, Sumas didn't participate in a district. So the city of Sumas maintains the Sumas Cemetery without a cemetery district. Do I go on to why? Let's not go. One of the reasons, once you get a cemetery district or a special need, I want to say special needs district, special districts, small districts, then you have state audits, you have elections, you have all this government regulation. So there still is a space in here for a cemetery district, but since they maintain it, it's fine. Now we're coming up to a little of the geography and hydrology of Sumas Lake. This is the Fraser and what it looked like before there was any, let's say, man-made developments. And this is a picture, this is the permanent lake. This is a picture of the permanent lake. And this is when the Fraser flooded. And you notice it went all the way down east of Sumas here, out into between, it got probably as far as the Rock Road, just touching Rock Road. But Jones Road, this area here, it would get that high. And that was every spring. Now you gotta remember, Nooksack normally floods during fall. Because you get snow melt and then you get warm weather. And normally, like I say, the Nooksack, because if that flood for the custom building was in November, and that's normal. But the Fraser floods in May, June, during that time because of the snow melt and such a big area. And this is a picture of the lake, Sumas Lake. This one is taken at, if you can pronounce it, Majuba Hill. This would be looking at, we call it Sumas Mountain up there too. Looking from probably the railroad grade. Oh, no, it can't be the railroad grade. Yeah, it can be. Because the railroad, the BC Railroad came in 1910. So you're looking across there. We're in Canada. This is having a picnic on the beach. What you should notice here, look how sandy that is. And we'll come to that, where that sand ends up. And here's this 1943 picture, and it's showing the sand dune. There was a big sand dune out east of Sumas here. This is between the Jones and the Rock Road, and I guess it was what, 15, 20 foot high. And I don't know exactly how it went, but it looks like it went in a kind of an arc. Apparently, if you go out there, you can see the end of it. You can still see the end of it out there by the Canadian border. They also say, Lowell Brown told me too, there was another one down here. Nimses lived down here, and there was a small one down in here somewhere. and this would be Sar Creek going through here. And this is a little history of the draining of the lake. It was, it's not good to get flooded, so they didn't like that. And so they tried for a long time they tried to do something about it. And it was only until about 1917, 1918, and then they started to really get serious. And lo and behold, in 1920, they started in for a $1.5 million project, and there was a cost overrun. Imagine that. And so in 1924, they were pumping the last of it out of the Sumas Prairie.
The old letters I seen were when they took the lake out, the Sumas Indians were starving to death.
I guess a good way of putting it too is asking them how they'd feel if they opened their fridge door and it was empty. I imagine that's how our people felt here. They woke up one day and the lake was dry. There was no more fish, no more ducks, no more nothing. When you came down the Harrison River, all you had to do was cross right over. You'd come right into Sumas Lake, cross the Fraser River, and you're right into Sumas Lake. Wasn't that far. So he said when they wanted sturgeon or fresh sturgeon and stuff like that, they came here, fished them. I guess we lost everything. That's why them people, like I say, they were a heartbroken, dying race. They say you just cross over the lake and go up into Elk Mountain. There's elk all over it up there. Go back up here in Sumas, they're deer. And there was a variety of different birds when I was a young boy. There was quail, grouse, pheasant, everything out there. Everything that we haven't got today was no more. They're all gone.
So what they did is they routed the Chilliwack River down here, down through the valley, and built it up. And so, and then Sumas River comes in here and they put a pumping station in here. So if the Fraser came up, they'd shut the gates and then just pump it over.
Afternoon.
Oh, this is some fish coming up.
Yeah, there's about 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. One's moving there. Well, they seem to rest. There's a whole group of them there. We'll see if they all move at one time.
This is a tributary that goes into Johnson Creek and then goes into Sumas River. So fish still go up that. So obviously they're
There they
not
are.
blocking the fish runs. And
One moving
in my
up.
slide series, I had a picture
They
of them
seem
going
to
up
be able
that
to move
Overflow
in the
Creek
stream
too.
pretty
Sumas Creek.
effortlessly.
So there's a lot of, there can be a lot of fish.
But what about the sturgeon?
One's just creeping forward over there. You can see it. It's gained about 6 feet now. Now the one that came out from the bank, you can see it coming out now.
This is coming at Cummings
Forward.
Creek.
Now one's turning back.
I call it Cummings Creek because no one knows where it is. That way don't trespass. The question was about the sturgeon. The sturgeon come back up to the pump plant but can't get any further. And they were saying 10 years after they drained the lake, they were plowing up sturgeon in some of the marshy areas. Where they were draining? Yes. I don't have to write the history of Sumas. It's already been written. Levon Hoffman. I don't know how many of you know Levon Hoffman. She wrote articles in the 1949, the 60th anniversary edition of the Sumas News. So I copied it and had my wife help me because it got long, my fingers started cramping out because it's quite long. And so I put it in a booklet, which I'll present to the library here. And she talks about all these different things. It was for she was getting, I want to say her master's, but probably getting her teaching certificate in the state of Washington from, it probably wasn't Western at that time, but Western. And there's all these different subjects she talks about. It's really interesting reading. So, and it made 38 pages, so 18-point font. So I did that so you can read it. So, yeah, she was one of my sources of information. If you want to know anything, you ask LaVon. She kept everything, she's got a file folder full of old Sumas news, anything you want to know. And she came here with, Virgil and her came here in 1944. 1945, he tore the rodeo grounds down. And he helped tear the Clearbrook School down, the big one, not the community center. He helped tear that down, and apparently some of that material is in the house that they used to live in. People did that more in the old days. They would reuse lumber. Now
Meet code.
doesn't meet code, and then if you do use it, you got to drill it's so hard, you have to drill a hole and then pound a nail. If you want to know anything about the town, Nooksack Valley Nostalgia, that's Debbie here at the library, keeps this up, does a wonderful job, and there's a lot of material in there. So if you want to know anything about Sumas and the town, that's where to go. And she likes to take one subject and then get as much information as she can. She posts it, and then everybody else is a historian, gives her even more. Do we want to go to the future, or do we want to call? This is Sumas 2212. This is the spring of Van Valkenburg Creek. You know, you go back to New York, and they have streams and back there. Well, this is what they end up: manhole cover in their grave. What happened? The overflow reach up at Everson. You know, the Nooksack wants to go to the Fraser in the worst way. And if you go down I want to call it the Lawrence Highway, Highway 9 now, you can look out there, and apparently the county has taken out some of the riprap, and it's coming this way. It's coming.
Sumas Creek starts over right behind the feed mill.
Yeah.
And that's about 80 feet, and Sumas is about 25 feet.
Elevation?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, it won't take much.
It's all downhill. That's why we had the floods in '89.
Well, then there's also Johnson Creek too. Johnson Creek starts right there, right past, just right past this point. This is a little down further, I want to say south and west.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't take, usually on a river, it takes a log jam. You have log jam, ice jam, something, boom. You can see Sumas Mountain. Sumas is right over here, down there, not too far. So what happened? Well, we have two philosophies. Up in Canada, we control it. We control the floods. And we build the vetter. We build the pump stations. We control that. What is Whatcom County's attitude?
We have treaties.
Natural. They want to go where the river naturally flows, so it's an overflow. The only thing that helped Sumas recently is when they built the bridge, they made it wider, so there's more water going through. But it's filling up, and it's just a matter of time.
Thank you.
Oh, to scare you even more. George Ferguson, mayor, former, I think he's still former mayor? Is he still mayor? He's former mayor. He got of Abbotsford.
Yeah.
Well, he got all excited because we're dumping all this. Well, there's two reasons why all this water goes up there. In the old days, it used to have, if you went out in the woods, there'd be all these little places where it could fill up. So the carrying capacity of the land was so much more than what it is today. Now it's all level, it's laser guided, and so boom, it's right up there to the pump station, and they don't like that. Why aren't we putting a levy on the Nooksack? Well, they're not putting a levy on it because then if they do that, then more water goes to Linden and goes down to Ferndale and floods them out. So they want it more natural. Well, that's nice. But I noticed that there's the Lagaway dike at around Everson. They put one there, so to protect.
We used to control the river really simply. We took a pile driver on a barge or a scow,
Yeah.
and went up the river and drove wing dams. And all down the river, if you go and look by the Hannigan Bridge, there are wing dams along there that keep the river within its channel. They're, deteriorating and get it further gone all the time.
Right. But also they took a lot of gravel out too.
But those wing dams just kept it running faster and moving. The gravel moved on, everything moved on. They did it in the Stillaguamish, they did it in all our western rivers. But that was too easy and too cheap.
Well, they also took a lot of gravel out because you had, 3 cement plants?
Oh, I think that's a drop in the bucket. We got 988 loaders and huge gravel trucks, and we could get gravel anywhere and do anything we wanted, and we could haul riprap or whatever we wanted back to the river instead of doing it right.
Well, anyway, this is the philosophy.
That's right.
And so there was an illegal dumping on McKay Point out here off Mission Road. They put some, and you talked about wing dams. They put some cement out here. It acted like a spur dike, just like they did at the water treatment plant or sewer plant down at Everson. It forced the river this way up to Johnson Creek. Yep. 2172. This is what happened.
Oh. That's in the future.
This is the future, and then I got a glimpse back to the future. Well, there was a problem.
Who's dreaming this?
There was a problem, and there was. Remember the last flood? There was a bunch of bales that got jammed up against the railroad trestle, and it caused a real problem. Well, in 2172, it was a round bale jam, and then by EPL, and it forced the river over towards Howard Bowen Memorial Park down into Bone Creek over to Sumas River. Now you think that's far-fetched, but guess what? Sumas, after 1990 flood, considered putting a canal around town to go to so they could control the flood here in Sumas. So, but that costs money. You got to have all kinds of studies, all that. Well, in 2172, the river did it free of charge. Okay, that's my presentation. Any questions? Do you have any? You can.
I have a statement. In 1908, there was an opera house opened in Sumas, and I own that opera house, and the curtain is still in it.
Balloon jacks?
The Balloon Jack. And the reason we know that is when we were rewiring it,
Yeah.
we found newspapers in the attic from 1908.
Interesting.
It used to have a ticket booth on the north end, and stairs up to the balcony on both sides, and 2 doors into the main floor.
Sumas was a booming town. They were a wet town too, and some of the local prohibitionists or whatever didn't like that.
They would have no concept of how wet it was before the Indians got gambling in 9/11.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Has the population been larger at one point than it is at the moment?
Yes. Yeah.
Quite a bit or a little bit?
Oh, I think in the boomtown because of the mills, the mines, and the railroad. It was booming. It was going to be San Francisco, Whatcom County, and there was also a tent city. There were so many people, there was a tent city here too. But after a flood or two, and a couple of depressions, it didn't do too much. Actually, there was, I counted, I got a book of all the different mills. I counted 19 different mills with the Sumas address. There were a lot of them.
Lumber mills?
Lumber mills. Now, some of them had changed names several times, but there were 19 of them, by different names. Miller's Mill, which is a Clearbrook connection. They started, they had a mill out by Clearbrook. And what's interesting, Robert Johnson, when he came here, and this is a whole new, this is a whole presentation in itself about the schools. Because when he came here, he didn't go to any school here in Sumas. He went to Clearbrook, which is interesting. Then he went to Garrett. And then one time he went to 3 different schools. So the schools, then the first school was up in the Van Valkenburg store, near where Napa is today. That was the first school. And then in 1892, they built Sumas Central School, I believe. It's on one of my slides, so. Okay.
So is the reason Clearbrook and Van Buren and all those small places disappeared was because Sumas had the railroad? Was that the biggest thing?
Pretty much.
Okay. So they
Pretty much, and then Clearbrook kind of disappeared because of the logging disappeared.
Because what?
The logging.
Oh.
They had already cut the trees by 1915 and moved on up the hills. Okay, good enough. Well, thank you.
Thank you.